Hi, welcome back. Happy fall. It's been a while. Hope you had a nice summer. Mine was pretty good. I didn't get much done here on the channel, but I did get quite a bit of gaming in. Solitaire as usual, but also quite a bit face to face as well, which was an interesting change of pace from my usual. Although I think now that it's mid-October, I'm ready to crawl back into my solitaire wargaming cave and hibernate and really more focus on my project here with the channel and my wargaming curriculum and everything. So we're gonna start back up where we left off as promised with King Philip's War. I'm hoping to at least start filming part of the intro, which is really just an impromptu look at the rules and components. And it should be a good time. Very entertaining because I don't really know what I'm doing, more than usual. And I also don't really know how to pronounce most of these names, so apologies in advance. But speaking of summer and face-to-face gaming, I did get a few sessions in of more wargaming stuff that I wanted to share with you here quickly, because there were a lot of firsts for me. And those include a 4-player session of Cuba Libre from GMT's Coin series, which I'm sure you all know and have played and whatever. But, you know, I had heard about it, was interested in it, but never imagined that I would get a chance to actually play it, especially not face-to-face, you know, with the full 4 players, at least not so soon. So that was a great opportunity. It worked out very well. I prepared beforehand, skimmed through the rules, and then it comes with these very nice, clear player aids, so it was a very smooth experience. That left my brain very tired at the end. But it has an amazing table presence, gorgeous components, very colorful board with nice, you know, wooden pieces. Definitely an eye catcher that caught the attention of quite a few passerbys in the cafe that we were playing in. Something that I'd like to revisit again in the future. Not sure how or if it really fits into my own personal wargaming project that I have going on here, but maybe eventually. That's one. Another thing first for me was my first tactical wargame experience with Combat Commander Pacific, a World War II tactical squad level hex encounter wargame that uses cards instead of dice, and the cards also have events and whatnot, but that left me wanting to find something similar to add to my collection. A World War II, you know, tactical hex encounter wargame, squad level. So I've been taking in suggestions, and please leave yours as well down below if you have any. It'll be primarily for soloing both sides, but I've become more and more flexible, you know, regarding what I consider solo friendly over the last year or so. So you know, Combat Commander is still in the running, and I hope that maybe there's even some sort of variant or suggested way to tweak the rules so that it's easier to deal with the cards. But if it means, you know, just playing by the rules and you know, keeping track of the 2 hands, it doesn't seem like it would be too bad. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And finally, I had purchased a game a while back and got a chance to play it face to face. That is Sign of the Pagan, published by Victory Point Games and designed by Richard Berg. So I thought that was an interesting combination. I'd never played a game designed by Richard Berg, so a lot of them are quite a bit more complicated than what I'm ready for right now. But this one looked more friendly to beginners, and it was my first experience with unit-facing rules, which was something I was curious about, and had a very good time with it. So those come with, that game comes with cards as well, but I can see it, you can probably easily play it just as well without the cards. Even with the cards, it shouldn't be too difficult to play both sides solo. So that is a game that I think I might add to the pile of games to cover on the channel. So look forward to that eventually. So I believe that's it as far as my update goes, and we're gonna get started here with King Philip's War. This is a game that was designed by John Paniski. I'm sorry for the mispronunciation. And published by Multiman Publishing. I think it was first came out in 2010. Yes. Complexity low, solitaire suitability high, on a scale of high, medium, or low. So let's take a look at this. Here's a view of most of the board setup. Before we get started, I wanted to make a quick mention of the reading material that I picked up, this companion book on the topic. This I picked up on the Kindle via Amazon. It's called King Philip's War, part of the Witness to History series by Daniel R. Mandel, subtitled Colonial Expansion, Native Resistance, and the End of Indian Sovereignty. I picked it up because it's only about 170 pages or so. A nice light read for a relatively light war game. Okay, here's the rule book. I just kind of wanted to quickly flip through it and point some stuff out before we take a look at the map. So we have your typical intro, list of components. Some games, actually, older games especially that I've purchased so far, have been missing the list of components, so yeah, can't take that for granted. Then you have the explanation of each of the game pieces, counters and markers, how to set up the game. There's some flexibility in how you set up. And then the sequence of play and a very detailed breakdown of that. And then scattered throughout the rulebook you find these historical notes in italics that I really appreciate. Found something similar in Operation Kremlin, but for those of us who especially are not especially familiar with the topic, it really helps to flesh out the narrative and give, the certain rules or design decisions, exceptions to rules, and mechanisms, more historical context to bring you into the story, less in terms of collecting victory points, and more in terms of the people and events and actions that unfold. So I'm always happy to see that. Let's see, more very, very detailed breakdown in the sequence of play that actually goes on for quite a while. And then you have your victory conditions at the end, and then some optional rules. And then this game, you have the full game, which is 9 turns, but it also offers you a short game variant that basically has you playing every other turn. And then these optional rules, I don't think I'll be using them. If any, maybe just the first one for disunited colonies, but maybe not right now during my learning game. Then a little section, a very brief overview of the history, and both of the topic and the game, how it was initially received by the public, and some interesting stuff going on there that I won't go into, but you could probably find it online. And then what I really like here is this abbreviated bibliography, which is actually quite long, and it doesn't list the book that I just mentioned, but a lot of probably even better books. magazine articles, and even fictional work as well as a documentary. And then down here in the credits section we see a few familiar names. This is, I didn't mention, but it is part of the International Games series, along with A Victory Lost, A Victory Denied, Warriors of God, and other very well-regarded titles. And you can see here that the developer was Adam Starkweather, who was the designer of A Victory Denied that we just covered last on this channel. We have here Mark Mahaffey under graphic artists, who we remember from the very cool looking map from Red Winter. I believe he's also working on the one for Operation Dauntless. And then we even have some familiar names under playtesters, so that's pretty exciting. And then very much appreciate this extended example of play that kind of clears up maybe some things that you may have missed reading through the rules. The game did come with a little slip of paper with some errata printed on them and clarifications, and then I found online another set of compiled errata and kind of clarifications that was actually quite a big file, although the actual errata section is just the first few pages. So I did my best to incorporate those, and I'm sure I'm going to get stuff wrong, but I'll do my best here to give you a rules overview. Alright, so the game starts on the early summer turn of 1675 and lasts 9 turns through the end of the late summer turn of 1676. The map represents New England at the start of the game with the units and their starting locations. The map itself is divided into colonies. We have Massachusetts Bay Colony up here, basically the top half of the map. There's Boston. And then you have Plymouth Colony over here on the side. There's Plymouth. Down here would be Martha's Vineyard. Over here we have Rhode Island. There's Providence and Great Swamp. And then over here we have Connecticut River, Hartford, and down here would be New Haven, etc. Those colonies are divided by these thick lines or colonial borders. And then you may notice that there are a bunch of these circles scattered about, some rimmed in white, some in red. So those areas represent the points in the point-to-point system, the areas such as Native American, henceforth Indian villages. So those are those white circles. Then we have these red rimmed circles. Those are the English settlements. Then you have neutral spaces, which are neither. And then these locations with these thick hexagonal borders. The white ones would be Indian forts, and then the red ones would be English forts. You have these lines that may connect to adjacent spaces. These lines or connections represent connections, land connections, such as trails or dirt paths. They have a number of white pips on them in the center, ranging from 1 to 3. The higher the number of pips, the more difficult the terrain is to traverse. And then you have these rivers, like I mentioned before, and they may connect to adjacent locations as well. And under certain circumstances, certain units would be eligible to use that river for river movement to move between those locations at a cost of equivalent to half a pip. And then you have these port locations with these dock icons, and English units would be able to use sea movement to move directly from one port to another for their entire movement allowance. Let's take a look at these units, which, by the way, in this game include the villages, settlements, and forts that have their own intrinsic defensive SPs, strength points. Alright, let's take a closer look at Plymouth Colony and Rhode Island, specifically our basic infantry units. And I'll do my best here. It's kind of confusing and I keep wanting to call the spaces hexes. So we have here an English unit of soldiers, and here an Indian warrior unit, both full strength, the two men depicted on the counter, showing that they have 2 SPs each, and they're 2-step units. On the first hit they get flipped, they're now weakened, have 1 man on the counter, reminding us that they're down to 1 SP, and then on the 3rd hit they're defeated and removed. They also have this colored band, this stripe running across the counter, yellow for the English unit, reminding us that it belongs to the colony of Rhode Island. You can see the settlements in Rhode Island have a similar band as well. And then white for these Wampanoag units. Wampanoags are a special case because they actually include the Pocasets and the Sakanets, and there's this little W printed on the counters to remind us of that. And it's important to distinguish tribes from each other and colonies from each other, because in the beginning of the game, at least, you generally cannot stack units from different colonies together, nor can you stack units from different tribes together, unless, in the case of the Indian units, Philip is stacked with them. So Philip, of course, begins on the board. We have him stacked here in Montop. But since all the Indian units have this W, it doesn't really pertain until we have our first allied units join us. Probably the Narragansetts. There's an Indian alliance chart that I'll show you in a moment. And then in the case of the English units, they definitely cannot stack. You can't have units from different colonies stacking until Benjamin Church enters the game. And he'll be entering definitely by on turn 6, if not earlier, depending on a die roll that you make every turn at the beginning of the turn. And the further into the game you are, the more likely he is to arrive on the scene and help out with that kind of coordination, along with several other things. Philip and Benjamin Church are both considered key leaders. There are also a couple more, one for each side. For the Indians, they will receive Canonchet after the first Philip diplomacy success. And in the case of the English player, they start out with Governor Josiah Winslow of Plymouth. Here I have him stacked in Middleborough. So we also have basic leaders, nameless leaders. For the English, there are these captains. And for the, I'll remove this. For the Indian player, we have sachems. And what they do is, among other things, increase the stacking limit from basic stacking limit of 2 infantry units per space to 3. So what do we have? 2 units there. We add a sachem. We can now add another unit of warriors. A stack of English soldiers is called a company, and a stack of Indian warriors is called a warband. Now, further into the game, the English may acquire some allies, some Indian allied Indians, and they would be able to stack with. This would happen after the arrival of Church, I believe. They would be able to stack with each other, or with English soldiers. If they're stacked with English soldiers, they become part of the company. If they're stacked alone, if you have a group, a stack of only allied Indian units, then they're referred to as a warband, and the rules that apply to warbands pertain to them, perhaps with a few exceptions. So we also have, like I said, other types of units. We're going to take a look at villages, settlements, and forts. These start out with, if they're, they start out intact, undamaged. In the case of settlements and villages, that means they have 2 SPs, I believe. No, I'm sorry, it's 1 SP. So if you're defending in an intact, undamaged settlement, you can add 1 SP to your strength. And then once the settlement or village takes a hit, it's then rated and goes down to 0 SP, and we have markers to indicate that. Here's one for the English side, and here's the rated village marker, the +0, to remind us. And then when they're hit again, they're razed, destroyed. You flip that over, and they become just like neutral spaces. The forts have 1 extra step, so they go from undamaged or intact with 2 SPs to damaged, which is a +1 SP, and then breached with 0 SPs, and then finally, I think I used the wrong marker on there. That should have been green, but it's the same thing. They become just like a neutral space. You can place that there. If there's a port on a raised settlement, village, or fort area, that port is no longer available, in this case, to the English player to use for port-to-port sea movement. Another benefit of the key leaders is that they have this +1, meaning that they contribute an additional strength point to a battle, whether attacking or defending, unlike the captains or the or sachems. Now, before we get into the sequence of play and flesh out some more of these rules, let me take a moment to describe the victory conditions, which I like to do earlier than later. So victory conditions are checked at the end of the turn. If the English or Indian player has accumulated 30 or more victory points at the end of the turn, then they're the winner, unless it's a tie, and then we determine the winner through the tiebreakers. There's a possibility that the game will end in a draw. And there are a couple of player-specific automatic victory conditions that may win you the game as well. For the English player, if at the end of the turn both Philip and Kananchet are dead and or on the turn track at the same time, then the English player would win. If the Indian player, on the other hand, has managed to raise both Boston and Plymouth, both of these English forts, then they would be the winner. In the case of a tie, then the player with the most victory points wins. If there's also a tie there, then the player who's lost the fewest number of total villages, settlements, or forts, the fewest number of raised villages, settlements, or forts would win. Otherwise, it would be a draw, and you accumulate victory points by defeating your enemy infantry units, by raising enemy villages, settlements, or forts, or if enemy leaders are lost, wounded, or killed, etc. So let's take a look at the sequence of play, starting with the first phase, which is the Church/Allied Indian role. Here's a look at the game turn track that runs vertically here along the side of the board. There's a special winter turn on turn 5 we'll talk about in a second, but next to that is the map key showing all the different types of spaces that we just talked about. Above that is the victory point / provisions lost track. The provisions lost markers keep track of the number of your own spaces that have been raised. Looking back at the game turn track on the first 5 turns, so below the first 5 turns you see these numbers. 1 through 2, 1 through 3, etc. That's the number that you're trying to roll as the English player on 1d6 at the beginning of the turn to get Church to enter the game. The sooner the better for you, because Church not only has all the benefits of a regular captain or key leader like Winslow, but also opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of maneuver, movement, etc. So, what does that mean? There's a before church and an after church period of the game, basically, BC and AC. So before church is in the game, the English player on their turn can only move up to 3 companies. They can only move along these 1 pip connections, and they cannot use river movement, and they can only create companies of soldiers from the same colony. And then once church enters the game, well, you can move up to 3 companies, you can start using those 2 or 3 pip connections, and if you have a company stacked with church, that company can take advantage of rivers for movement, which is huge. And very importantly, you can have companies that are made up of soldiers from different colonies. And I'm sure I'm missing something, but those are major. Oh yes, and the number of battle markers that you can lay per turn, number of battles that you can conduct goes up from 3 to 5. So we have 3 companies that can move and battle before church, and those numbers go up to 5 for, in both cases, movement and combat. Starting on the turn that church enters the game, and every turn after that, the beginning of the turn, you make, as the English player, an allied Indian roll, and you're trying to roll on a 1d6 a modified 1 or less, with a -1 die roll modifier for every 2 raised Indian villages on the board. And there are these allied Indian counters, limited by the counter mixer 6. So for each successful roll, you receive 1 full strength allied Indian unit that you can place on any neutral space on the board, including raised villages or settlements or forts. And any company that consists of such a unit is also capable of utilizing rivers for movement. The next thing that happens is the English reinforcements phase that's skipped on the first turn, but it's during this phase we look down here on the player aid to find out how many soldiers we receive per turn for each colony. Those reinforcements are placed in a settlement of that colony and or with a company from that colony within the stacking limitations, which are always in effect during the entire game. If all the settlements of a colony have been raised, you no longer receive reinforcements for that colony as the English player. And it's also during this turn that any previously lost captains that are on the current turn on the turn track are placed on the board. So you see on the back here it says returns in 2 turns. So when this is lost, you stick it on the board and can get it back later during the reinforcements phase. While we're here, I'll show you the winter effects. Pip movement costs are doubled, and you can only place up to 3 battle markers for each side. And up here you'll see the movement and battle summaries that I explained the English before and after church, but over here you'll see the Indians' abilities, and this is from the get-go. From turn 1, they can move up to 5 warbands, they can place up to 5 battle markers, they can spend up to 6 pips to move. And actually I didn't explain that the English units have movement allowances of 5 pips. They can use river movement, but they may never use ocean movement. After this phase, we enter the Indian diplomacy phase, which is voluntary, and you also have to meet certain conditions as the Indian player to be able to recruit other tribes to join your cause, to join Philip. So here's the Indian alliance chart. We look at this both during this phase and the following Indian reinforcements phase, which is much like the English reinforcements phase and skipped on the first turn. But anyway, we start out with these three tribes that are allied and these initial forces, and then here's a list of the number of reinforcements per turn we receive for each tribe and the total number of units. And then here's the number of settlements that need to be raised before Philip can attempt to conduct diplomacy with these certain tribes. And you're limited to 1 tribe per turn. and you simply, for example, if we have successfully raised 2 settlements as the Indian player, we can then take Philip and up to 1 warrior unit and teleport them to a village of that tribe, in this case the Narragansetts. And at that point we would receive these initial forces, and then on the following Indian reinforcements phase of, I believe, the following turn, and every turn after that you receive an additional number of reinforcements per this chart here. The Mohawks are a special exception. There's some special rules with them. They're a little bit more unpredictable, sometimes dangerous, and I think I'll just go over that if we go over that during the playthrough. There are a lot of exceptions and additional rules that I'm skipping over, obviously. So yes, we enter the Indian reinforcements phase at this point, and a tribe must be allied with Philip for the Indian player to receive reinforcements for that tribe, and they may be placed on any village of that tribe. If all villages of a tribe have been razed, then you would no longer receive those reinforcements. And for both the English and Indian reinforcements phases, if you can't place the reinforcements for reasons other than everything being razed and you not receiving them, you can delay those a turn. And let's see, you may have also noticed that there were musket counters on the turn track. This is when the Indian player would receive that counter. That's an additional 1 strength point, maximum of 1 per warband. So you can place that on with a warband that's located either at a port or a river space. And you can delay those as well, only if you cannot place them. And once a warband with muskets is defeated or surrenders, then the musket counters permanently removed. And they do move along with the unit. Let's see, this is also when you place previously lost sachems, so they also have on the back here returns in 2 turns. There's a little side note about leaders, including captains, sachems, and key leaders. Leaders may move by themselves, but they must always end their movement in a space occupied by a friendly unit, and that includes a friendly village, settlement, or fort. And then we enter the Indian movement phase, Indian combat, then English movement, and English combat. Here's the combat sequence and our combat results table here with the list of all the modifiers over here off camera. And then down below here you can see part of the event die effects, and you can see the dice that are included in the game. We have English red, Indian green, and this event die. And during combat, well, I'm jumping the gun because I'm getting excited because this is the fun part, right? I guess we should pull back and talk about movement here. Alright, let's talk about movement. Generally speaking, a unit cannot enter, move through, or end their movement in an intact enemy village, settlement, or fort. They can if it's raised. When it's raised, it's considered neutral and open to anyone to enter or move through. An allied Indian unit can move through in English settlements and forts, but they cannot end their movement in one. Similarly, the Indian warrior units cannot end their movement in a village of a tribe that's still inactive and non-allied, but they can pass through them. So we can move Indian units at the beginning of the game from a Wampanoag village or fort through any combination of Narragansett villages and neutral spaces, for example, and end in either a neutral space or a friendly space. The movement allowance of Indian units is 6 pips, and it's 5 pips for English units. And those 6 pips apply to allied Indian units as well when they enter the game. Indian units, including allied units, can use river movement to go from one point to another that's adjacent, connected by a river. Costs a half a pip. These numbers change in the winter, on the winter turn, as we've seen. And then to use ocean movement as the English, to move from one port to any other port on the board, costs all of their movement points. And we're limited to the number of warbands or companies that we can activate and move during the movement phase. The Indian player can move up to 5, the English 3 in the beginning, 5 after church. The English at the beginning are limited to these 1 pip connections. And battles are kind of a function of movement. So instead of actually moving your units into your target, you just place a battle marker on the connection. So let's say at the beginning, if we wanted to, that's a good example. I'm trying to use movement here as well. Let's say we were here. Let's say we were up here with the Bocassets, and they wanted to target Providence. They could move here for 1 pip and then lay down a battle marker for another pip, still within their movement allowance of 6. Another option here during the movement phase would be to simply place a battle marker without moving your units. The Indians can place up to 5 per turn. So this would target Wickford. Even if Wickford were not occupied by infantry units or leaders, we could still target that hex because it has that defensive strength and it's still intact. And then these battles would be resolved in the next phase, the combat phase. Before we get into that, I should also talk briefly about interception. Here's the part of the playwright that deals with interception next to the section on evasion that we'll look at shortly here when we talk about combat resolution. This video is getting really long. Okay, so basically you can attempt to intercept at a neutral location, a neutral space, any moving enemy warband or company that enters it, as long as you have a friendly stack that's adjacent, connected via these dotted land connections, and as long as that friendly stack would be able to move into that location during their own movement phase. So during the first turns, until Church enters the game, the English player would not be able to intercept over 2 or 3 pip connections. And let's see, you can also attempt to intercept a battle marker, meaning if an enemy is attempting to attack a friendly village, settlement, or fort, and you have a friendly stack that's adjacent to that location, then that stack may attempt to intercept that attack. Again, you would have to be able to move into the location. You don't actually move your units there quite yet until you roll your die, your d6, and apply these modifiers and get a 5 or higher. The modifiers include a negative modifier for the number of pips in the connection, positives for leaders, and then we have here 1 for spy, 1 for guide, which we'll talk about when we deal with the event die. So you're getting a 5 or higher. If you're successful, in the case of the neutral space, the moving enemy stack would then pull back, go back to where it came from, and then you would choose one of the friendly stacks involved in interception. You can roll once for each intercepting friendly stack. You would choose one to advance into that hex, not hex, neutral space, and then you would place a battle marker between that intercepting friendly stack and the stack that was just intercepted. That battle marker would count towards the total of allowable battle markers for the active player's turn. In the case of intercepting a battle marker, you would advance your units into that friendly village, settlement, or fort that you were defending. And there are other little things and exceptions, and probably things that I'm messing up and forgetting, but we're going to move on to the combat phase. I should add that units that are already connected to a battle marker at this point are considered engaged and not able to attempt an interception. Also, leaders may not attempt to intercept alone. They must be accompanied by at least one infantry unit. Here's a look again at the combat sequence steps, combat results table, modifiers, and the dice. So the first thing that we have is a voluntary evasion step that the defending player can take by evading, moving their defending stack to an adjacent spot as long as it's not a non-allied, non-active village or space that contains an enemy unit, or a space that's already connected to a battle marker, or if they would be breaking the stacking limits by doing so, because they have to move everyone together. Then, if the space that they vacated is one of their own villages, settlements, or forts, then the battle would still be resolved. However, that location would now be undefended by any infantry units or leaders. And if it's a neutral spot, then you just flip the battle marker. On the flip side, there's a battle fought side that you can use to help you remember where you are. Then the attacking side can choose to advance into the vacated hex. Then you roll the dice and determine the event die effect. So the first thing you look at after you roll the dice are these red and green dice to determine if they're doubles. If you roll doubles, then you just ignore the event die, ignore everything, nothing happens, no event takes place, there is no battle. Otherwise, you'd look to see if the result, the total of the two dice, is even, in which case the event die would apply to the English player. If it's odd, then it would apply to the Indian player. Then you look down here at the event die effects, of which there are 6 possibilities, and you resolve, and we'll get into this during the playthrough. Basically, it may determine the order in which the losses are applied. If there's a shift in the combat results table, if you receive a spy or a guide or an extra friendly unit during step 8 of the combat sequence, or if you have to ignore one of your own units in the calculation of your total SPs for the combat. And then you would determine losses here, applying these modifiers for both sides, and apply those losses either to the units, because the villages, forts, and settlements are units too. And then, let's see, you would remove and record losses, and advance after combat if you choose, adjust victory points if needed, remove and record losses. Okay. Yeah, that's simply flipping units, etc. Yeah, and possibly placing these markers on the board. And then the victory points you gain for defeated units, as described at the beginning of the video. A possible apply event die if needed. A few of these take effect during this step 8, and then once all battles are resolved and the markers are flipped to their battle fought side, at this point you can remove all of that and move on to the next phase, which if it's turn 5, the winter turn, would be winter attrition. If not, you would now check for victory conditions and go into the next turn if neither player has achieved victory. I think that this will wrap it up. It's getting pretty late, and I'm hoping to get this up by tonight or sometime tomorrow. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good night.